They were squished in lunchboxes and stuffed with memories. Now they are gone, like recess on a rainy day. What happened to the school sandwiches we grew up with? And why does forgetting them feel so personal? Peanut butter and pickle sandwiches were the lunchbox legends nobody admits to loving, but many still secretly miss. Born out of the Great Depression, this odd pairing was less about culinary boldness and more about making do with what was left in the pantry. Peanut butter was cheap, packed with protein, and shelf-stable. Pickles added crunch, tang, and just enough bite to wake up plain white bread. Somehow, the combination worked. The sweet creaminess of the peanut butter and the sharp, vinegary snap of a dill or bread and butter pickle created a balance that stayed with you, whether you liked it or not. These sandwiches were slipped into wax paper and handed off like rationed gold. Some kids traded them. Others guarded them with their lives. They were cheap. They were weird. And they were unforgettable. As the decades rolled on and lunch menus got glossier, peanut butter and pickle sandwiches faded from view. It might not win a gourmet prize today, but back then, it was a masterpiece made from struggle and stubbornness. Fluffernutters were the sugar bombs of childhood, smeared between slices of Wonder Bread like sticky little secrets. Made from peanut butter and marshmallow creme, this New England classic was as sweet as the recess bell and just as anticipated. No meat, no veggies, just a sugary swirl that glued your sandwich shut and made your fingers tacky with every bite. The texture was half the fun: soft bread, gooey center, and that unmistakable stretch of marshmallow when you pulled the halves apart. They were a staple of elementary school lunch tables, always wrapped in plastic and slightly flattened from being stuffed into a backpack. Every bite tasted like skipping spelling tests and drawing dinosaurs in the margins of your notebook. The Fluffernutter was not subtle. It was not sophisticated, but it made you feel like you were getting away with something. Over time, it disappeared from school menus and fell out of fashion, replaced by yogurts and wraps and grown-up meals for tiny hands. The tuna and cream cheese sandwich was what your grandmother made when she wanted to feed you something fancy that was also suspiciously efficient. It was a relic from the 1940s, a time when mayonnaise was not the only binder in town and lemon juice felt like fine dining. Chilled tuna blended with cream cheese, a touch of citrus, and sometimes even crushed pecans or chopped celery. This sandwich wore a pressed napkin and gave off a whiff of Sunday brunch in the cafeteria. Kids either loved it or politely folded it back into the sandwich bag and focused on their chocolate milk instead. The bread was often buttered, soft, and crustless if someone was feeling generous. What made this sandwich stick in the mind was its smoothness, its unexpected tang, and how it seemed to signal that whoever packed your lunch had a plan. This was not a slapdash peanut butter job. This was intentional. Over time, tuna salad took the spotlight and cream cheese retreated to bagels and frosting. But in lunchboxes from another era, it played a surprisingly elegant role. The chow mein sandwich was chaos held together by two buns, and somehow it worked. Born in southeastern Massachusetts, this Frankenstein creation placed a mound of crispy chow mein noodles smothered in thick brown gravy between two hamburger buns. The result was a crunchy, savory, totally illogical meal that became a school lunch staple in some corners of the country. Kids would unwrap their foil-wrapped mystery and find a puddle of sauce and starch that somehow filled every craving and left fingers coated in grease. This was the kind of sandwich you could not eat neatly, and that was half the fun. The noodles poked out the sides, the sauce soaked into the bread, and no two bites were ever the same. The chow mein sandwich was a lunchtime dare wrapped in cultural mashup, a reminder that not all great foods make perfect sense on paper. Over time, regional oddities like this one gave way to standardization. One bite, and you were somewhere between comfort food and total confusion, and somehow that felt exactly right. The lettuce sandwich was what you got when there was nothing else, and yet it became something more. Just two slices of bread and a few crisp leaves in between, maybe with a swipe of butter or a dusting of salt if someone was feeling generous. It was minimalist, it was plain, but in a strange way, it was also pure. In the early 20th century, when meat was a luxury and refrigeration was not guaranteed, the lettuce sandwich became a reliable go-to. It was light, refreshing, almost delicate in a time when food was anything but. Packed into school lunches, it was easy to make, hard to mess up, and always surprising in how much it satisfied. Kids might groan, but they still ate it, and maybe even liked it. Over time, it faded into punchlines and parody, replaced by protein-heavy, sauce-drenched monsters that took 3 napkins to conquer. But the lettuce sandwich was never trying to impress. It was just trying to get the job done. And sometimes, that was enough. Sloppy Joes were the lunchtime wild card, messy, meaty, and guaranteed to stain your shirt. Every cafeteria had a day when trays were heavy with hamburger buns oozing with ground beef cooked in tomato sauce and mystery spices. It was not elegant, it was not clean, but it was comforting. Sloppy Joes were everything lunch was supposed to be: warm, hearty, and just a little unruly. One bite and half of it landed on your tray. That was the rule. Napkins were never enough. These sandwiches showed up in school lunch lines, birthday parties, and weeknight dinners when parents had 30 minutes and a pound of beef. They were versatile, easy, and crowd-pleasing in the way only something unapologetically simple could be. The sauce was sweet and tangy, the meat hearty, the bun soft and doomed from the first bite. You could smell Sloppy Joe Day before you saw it on your plate. Over the years, they lost their place to healthier, neater options, but no one ever forgot them. Hot browns were not just sandwiches, they were events. Hailing from Louisville, Kentucky, the hot brown was the kind of school lunch you did not expect to see in your lunchbox. But when you did, everything else faded away. It was open-faced, built on toasted bread, and layered with turkey bacon and a thick, rich Mornay sauce that made it feel like something that belonged in a fancy hotel, not the corner of a cafeteria tray. The whole thing was broiled until bubbly, golden, and just messy enough to feel indulgent. It smelled like home. It tasted like someone had really tried. Most kids stared at it, confused. But for those who knew what they were looking at, it was heaven. Each bite was creamy, salty, and warm, something between comfort food and special occasion. You ate it with a fork, or tried to. It was not meant to be neat. It was meant to fill you up and slow you down. Today, you will find them in restaurants, dressed up and modernized. But nothing hits like the homemade version packed with love. Peanut butter and honey sandwiches were the gentle cousin of the classic peanut butter and jelly, quieter, softer, and maybe a little sweeter. Instead of fruit preserves, this version replaced the tang with something more mellow, something that stuck to the roof of your mouth and made your fingers smell like golden syrup all afternoon. It was the sandwich you got when the jelly jar was empty, but love was still in stock. A simple swipe of peanut butter on one slice, a drizzle of honey on the other, and 2 halves pressed together until the honey oozed just enough to make you pause. These sandwiches were often packed quickly, folded into wax paper, and slightly crushed by the weight of textbooks. But that did not matter. If anything, it made them better. There was something old-fashioned about it, something kind. Peanut butter and honey tasted like slow mornings, kind grandparents, and meals that did not need to be fancy to be filling. Today, they are harder to find in school cafeterias and less likely to show up in lunchboxes full of brand-name snacks. The bologna and ketchup sandwich was the lunchroom underdog, a squishy, no-frills sandwich that somehow earned its place among childhood favorites. It was cheap, fast, and unapologetically plain. A slice or two of bologna, straight from the fridge, slapped onto soft sandwich bread, and dressed with a squirt of ketchup. That was it. No lettuce, no cheese, no frills. But in its simplicity was something oddly satisfying. The bologna was smooth and salty. The ketchup added tang and sweetness. The bread held it all together like a peace treaty between convenience and hunger. It showed up in mid-century lunchboxes packed by parents who needed to stretch a budget and feed a family. Kids would open their bags, see that red smear pressed through the plastic wrap, and know exactly what to expect. There was no surprise, and somehow that was comforting. It was a sandwich that never pretended to be more than it was, and maybe that is why it stuck around as long as it did. You rarely see them now, lost in a sea of organic spreads and artisanal fillings. Egg salad sandwiches were messy, mushy, and magical in the way only school lunch legends can be. Made from chopped hard-boiled eggs, mayonnaise, and a touch of mustard or seasoning, egg salad was the sandwich that smelled strong and stuck with you, literally and figuratively. It was packed between slices of soft bread and often left a faint imprint on the bag it came in. And yet, it was beloved. There was something comforting about it, something that felt homemade and humble. It was a meal you could trust. Some versions had bits of celery or onion, others kept it basic. But every egg salad sandwich came with a promise. You were going to be full, and you were going to remember it. Kids either cherished it or turned up their noses. There was no in-between. But for those who loved it, egg salad was the crown jewel of the lunchbox. Today, it is often replaced by cleaner, quieter options, tucked away in prepackaged containers at the back of the deli case. Pimento cheese sandwiches were a Southern love letter written in cheddar, mayonnaise, and bright red pimentos, served between soft white bread and packed with personality. This was not just a sandwich. It was a tradition, a ritual, and sometimes a dare for kids unfamiliar with its bold, tangy flavor. The cheese was sharp. The mayonnaise mellowed it out. The pimentos? They brought color, a hint of sweetness, and that unmistakable peppery kick. Pimento cheese was often whipped into a spread and slapped onto sandwich bread before being wrapped in wax paper and tossed into a lunchbox. It squished a little, stained the paper orange, and always felt like it had something to prove. Some kids swapped them, others hid them, but everyone remembered them. It was not the kind of sandwich that blended in, and that was the point. Over the years, it slipped out of school cafeterias and into specialty food menus, but back then, it was a staple that defined a region and a generation. It was homemade, it was messy, and it was honest. Ham salad sandwiches were what you made when dinner became tomorrow's lunch, and nothing went to waste. Chopped leftover ham mixed with mayonnaise, a spoonful of relish, and maybe a dash of mustard turned into something far greater than the sum of its parts. The result was creamy, salty, tangy, and just textured enough to let you know this was not store-bought. It sat heavy on white bread and came wrapped in wax paper or pressed gently into a sandwich bag that stuck to the crust by lunch hour. Kids either loved ham salad or politely declined the swap. It had presence. A slightly chunky spread with pink edges and flecks of green. Grandparents swore by it. Cafeterias served it weekly, and for a long time, it was a way to turn leftovers into something that felt brand new. It was a lunchbox classic for those raised with one hand on the cutting board and the other on the budget. Today, it rarely shows up in modern school lunches, replaced by prepackaged options and flashier flavors. Deviled ham sandwiches were not for the faint of heart. They came with a kick and a scent that announced their presence the moment you unwrapped the wax paper. Ground ham mixed with spicy mustard, paprika, and seasonings that somehow always felt a bit mischievous, packed between slices of white or rye bread. It was meat with an attitude. The kind of sandwich that either made your eyes light up or your nose crinkle in confusion. Popularized by the little Underwood cans, deviled ham was both a pantry staple and a school lunch wild card. It had bite, it had heat, and it came with just enough mystery to make you wonder what exactly deviled meant. These sandwiches were strong in taste, smell, and opinion. Some kids loved them, others traded them instantly for chips or chocolate milk, but they always left an impression. Today, they are rarely seen, buried beneath layers of more polite sandwich options. But deviled ham was once a schoolyard standout, strange, spicy, and unforgettable. The cheese and pickle sandwich was for the kids who liked things sharp and sour, a little strange, and completely satisfying. A thick slice of cheddar, sometimes aged, layered with sweet pickles or tangy dill slices pressed between slices of sandwich bread, often white, occasionally wheat. It was a flavor bomb. Salty cheese met vinegary crunch, and somehow the combination made more sense than you would think. This was not a loud sandwich. It did not leak or crumble or stain your lunch bag. It sat there quietly, confident in its simplicity. You either craved it or could not stand it. But for those who loved it, it was perfect. It was the kind of sandwich you could eat cold, no heating or fuss required. It stayed intact. It delivered every time. Over the years, cheese and pickle became more of a British delicacy than an American staple. But there was a time when this sandwich showed up in lunchboxes across the country. Today, it is rarely seen in school cafeterias. The peanut butter and banana sandwich was sticky, sweet, and oddly sacred, especially if you grew up with a radio playing Elvis in the background. Soft white bread cradled ripe banana slices layered atop thick peanut butter, creating a sandwich that was pure indulgence and pure nostalgia all at once. It was comfort food at its simplest. No baking, no slicing, just a knife, a spoon, and one slightly bruised banana. Kids loved it. Parents trusted it. Lunchboxes welcomed it. Every bite was creamy, soft, and just a little bit messy. Sometimes it got mashed during the morning bus ride, but that only made it better, denser, more unified, like the ingredients had been given time to fall in love. Elvis Presley may have added bacon to his, but most kids were happy with just the basics. Over the years, the peanut butter and banana sandwich faded from lunch menus, traded out for wraps and granola bars. But it never really disappeared. Chicken salad sandwiches were the quiet heroes of the lunchroom, the kind of sandwich that looked unassuming but delivered comfort in every bite. They started with leftover chicken, chopped fine or shredded, then folded into mayonnaise with bits of celery, sometimes a hint of onion, maybe a touch of mustard or dill. It all depended on who made it. Every family had their version. Some were creamy, some were chunky, some were elegant enough for tea parties and school lunch alike. Slapped between slices of white wheat or a buttered roll, chicken salad was never flashy, but it never disappointed. It felt like home, like Sundays turned into Mondays. It was cold, clean, and quietly satisfying. Kids who got a chicken salad sandwich in their lunchbox were either praised or pitied, depending on who you asked, but they always remembered it. Today, chicken salad has migrated to cafe menus and plastic deli containers, far from its humble homemade origins. Liverwurst sandwiches were bold. You knew it the moment someone unwrapped one across the table. That unmistakable scent, rich and meaty, mixed with sharp mustard or sliced onions, hit like a wave. The sandwich itself was unapologetically old school, usually served on rye or pumpernickel bread, often from a family who still shopped at the neighborhood butcher. Liverwurst was spreadable sausage, soft but full of iron and flavor, and it had no intention of going unnoticed. It was the sandwich your grandpa swore by, the one your parents either embraced or exiled. And for kids, it was a gamble, either a lunchroom legend or a quick trade for something with peanut butter. But for those who loved it, liverwurst was gold. It was hearty. It was grown up. It was tradition sliced thick and pressed between slices of something dark and sturdy. Liverwurst never begged for your approval. It knew it was not for everyone. Today, you hardly see it outside specialty stores and deli counters. But for a time, it was part of the rotation. Loved by few, remembered by all. Cucumber sandwiches were delicate little reminders that even the school lunch table had room for refinement. Slices of cucumber, thin, chilled, often peeled, rested on buttered bread, sometimes layered with cream cheese or a dash of dill. The bread was soft, sometimes crustless, sometimes rye. It was like a tea party had wandered into the cafeteria. Cucumber sandwiches were quiet, crisp and cooling, refreshing in a world of meat and mustard. They did not make a mess. They did not leave a smell. But they stood out, precisely because they did not try to. These sandwiches were usually packed by someone who believed in manners, napkins, and balance. They were for the kid with the neat lunchbox, the thermos that never leaked, and the sandwiches that never squished. But they were not boring. Today, they are mostly seen at brunches or fancy luncheons. But back then, they were a gentle rebellion against the chaos of the cafeteria tray. Tomato sandwiches were summer captured between slices of white bread, simple and sublime. Nothing more than fresh, juicy tomato slices, a generous smear of mayonnaise, and a sprinkle of salt and pepper. That was it. But somehow, It was everything. The bread soaked up the juice until it was just on the edge of falling apart. The mayo added richness. The salt made the tomato sing. And when you bit into it, it felt like sunshine. These sandwiches were often packed right after a backyard harvest or a trip to the local farmer's stand. They were the definition of seasonal eating. No heating, no meat, just freshness layered onto something soft and humble. Kids either loved the tomato sandwich or hated it. There was no in between. But for those who did love it, nothing else would do. The sandwich tasted like summer break, like porch swings and cicadas, like sitting in class and counting down the days until school let out. Tomato sandwiches came and went with the season, and when they left, you missed them. You remembered how something so simple could somehow be so full. Fried bologna sandwiches were the working-class answer to gourmet, cheap, greasy, and absolutely perfect. A slice of bologna slapped into a hot skillet until it curled at the edges, sometimes scored in the center to keep it flat, then dropped onto bread and finished with mustard, cheese, or whatever was around. It sizzled, it popped, it smelled like something you were not supposed to enjoy this much. And kids loved it. The edges got crisp, the center stayed soft. It was the kind of sandwich that left a grease spot on the bag and a smile on your face. Fried bologna was not subtle, but it was reliable. It was warm and familiar. It made lunch feel like breakfast and dinner all at once. Parents made them quickly, often with one hand on the stove and the other helping with homework. It was the sandwich of multitaskers, of big families and thin budgets. And yet it tasted rich. It felt like a treat. Today you barely see them unless you go looking. But for those who grew up on it, fried bologna was not just food. It was a full sensory memory wrapped in white bread. Peanut butter and marshmallow sandwiches were sticky, chewy, and completely chaotic in the best way. Unlike the Fluffernutter, which used smooth marshmallow creme, this version went old school, layering whole marshmallows right onto the peanut butter. The result was messier, thicker, and somehow more exciting. As you bit down, the marshmallows gave a stretch, and the peanut butter clung to everything: your teeth, the roof of your mouth, your fingers. It was the kind of sandwich that slowed you down, made you chew carefully, and left sweet residue in the corners of your smile. Some kids toasted it, watching the marshmallows melt into gooey bliss. Others just packed it cold and let the sandwich warm up on its own in their backpack by noon. Either way, it was dessert disguised as lunch, and it was glorious. You rarely saw it outside of grade school, but back then, it was a lunchbox secret weapon. No meat, no greens, no apologies, just joy between two slices of bread. Cheese and apple sandwiches were the bite you never knew you needed. Sweet, sharp, and surprisingly grown up for something packed in a kid's lunchbox. Thin slices of crisp apple, usually red or golden, laid against salty cheddar cheese and pressed between soft bread, created a mix of flavor that hit every corner of the tongue. The crunch of the apple, the tang of the cheese, it all worked. There was something about that pairing, fruit and dairy, sweet and savory, that felt more like a farmer's market find than a cafeteria mainstay. But for many kids, especially those with creative parents or fond memories of fall, it was a staple. Sometimes it showed up on wheat bread, sometimes toasted. Occasionally even wrapped in foil with a note that said, "Eat me cold, it's better that way." It was not a flashy sandwich. No bright colors or sauces, just good ingredients and smart contrast. Over time, it faded into the background as processed snacks took over, but that apple and cheese combo still feels like one of those rare lunchbox moments when everything just made sense. Salmon salad sandwiches were the quiet cousins of tuna salad, just as creamy, just as homemade, but with a taste that caught you off guard. Made from canned salmon, mashed with mayonnaise and a few dashes of seasoning, it was a sandwich that felt fancier than it had any right to be. It sometimes had diced onion, sometimes celery, sometimes nothing but salt and pepper and whatever was on hand. Spread thick on white or rye bread, it carried the scent of the sea and the comfort of Sunday leftovers. It was not flashy, it was not for everyone, but it was honest. Salmon salad was often packed by parents or grandparents who remembered when fish was a treat, not just something from a drive-thru. It was nutritious, filling, and just enough out of the ordinary to make you notice. Kids either traded it away or claimed it proudly, like a secret code for being raised right. It rarely shows up in lunchboxes today, but in vintage kitchens and handwritten recipes it still holds its place. Quiet, consistent, and always just a little unexpected. Olive and cream cheese sandwiches were the salty surprise you never saw coming. Chopped green olives, sometimes stuffed with pimentos, blended into whipped cream cheese until every bite was speckled with little bursts of brine. Spread thick on soft white bread, this sandwich had bite, character, and just enough punch to make you sit up straighter when you ate it. It was a favorite in homes where bold flavors were not just tolerated but celebrated. Kids who brought olive and cream cheese sandwiches to school were not following trends. They were following traditions. It was rich, tangy, a little bit strange. And if you liked it, you really liked it. The olives gave it salt, the cream cheese gave it body, and the bread, usually soft, sometimes toasted, held it together like a blank canvas for a sharp little painting. These sandwiches felt like something out of a bridge club meeting or an old cookbook, but they made their way into lunchboxes all the same. They are not common anymore, but if you ever had one, you remember exactly how it tasted, because no other sandwich came close. Peanut butter and bacon sandwiches were the Rebels' lunchbox choice. Salty, sweet, and totally indulgent. It started with a thick layer of peanut butter on bread, just like any normal day. But then came the twist. Crispy bacon strips laid on top, adding crunch, salt, and a smoky flavor that transformed everything. It felt like a dare, like breakfast and lunch had collided in the best way possible. The sandwich was sticky, crispy, and rich, a flavor explosion that made plain sandwiches seem like background noise. Some kids loved it instantly. Others needed convincing. But if it ever showed up in your lunchbox, you remembered it. Bacon added heft. It made the peanut butter feel more like a meal. And that sweet, salty contrast stuck with you long after the sandwich was gone. These days, it is more likely to show up on gourmet menus than cafeteria trays. But it started right here, between two slices of white bread packed with a paper napkin and eaten with a grin. Turkey and cranberry sandwiches were like packing Thanksgiving into your lunchbox, sweet, savory, and a little sentimental. Slices of cold turkey layered with cranberry sauce, sometimes with stuffing if you were lucky, all held together by soft sandwich bread or a hearty roll. It was a meal wrapped in a memory, a bite of holiday in the middle of a school day. Most kids had it once a year, maybe the week after Thanksgiving, but some lucky ones got it more often, courtesy of a parent who knew how to turn leftovers into magic. The turkey was mild. The cranberry sauce added tang and sweetness. It felt like someone had put thought into your lunch. Not just a sandwich, but a reminder of home. You could spot it across the lunch table and know what it was. Today, the turkey and cranberry combo lives on in upscale delis and seasonal menus. Egg and olive sandwiches were the kind of bold move you either cherished or avoided. Chopped hard-boiled eggs mixed with sliced green olives and a spoonful of mayonnaise made for a salty, tangy, creamy spread that hit your mouth with flavor right away. It was not gentle. It was not trying to blend in. And it absolutely was not for everyone. But if you liked it, you were loyal. The eggs brought richness. The olives added snap and bite. The mayo held it together like a handshake between old friends. Served on rye, wheat, or soft white bread, it was the kind of sandwich that said someone had made it by hand. Someone who knew their way around a kitchen and was not afraid of strong flavors. These sandwiches came from a time when food did not shy away. It made its presence known. You rarely see them now, outside of old cookbooks or church luncheons. But back then, they were a lunchtime statement. You might get teased, or you might get admired. Either way, you never forgot it. Peanut butter and raisin sandwiches were the quieter cousin of the peanut butter and jelly. Less flashy, less messy, but full of charm. Instead of jam, you pressed raisins into the peanut butter, dotting each slice of bread like a trail of edible Morse code. The texture was everything. The chew of the raisins, the creaminess of the peanut butter. It was a sandwich you had to work through slowly. No drips, no stains, just that steady balance of nutty and sweet. For some kids, it was a favorite. For others, it was a compromise when the jelly jar ran dry. But for those who grew up on it, the peanut butter and raisin sandwich was a comforting constant. It felt like an after-school snack dressed up for the lunchroom. You do not see it much anymore, replaced by snack packs and squeeze tubes, but in a simpler time, it was a staple. And every now and then, when you bite into that combination again, it takes you right back to linoleum floors, carton milk, and the gentle crinkle of wax paper. Cheese and tomato sandwiches were summer stacked between two slices of bread. Simple, juicy, and just the right kind of messy. A slice or two of cheddar or American cheese laid over ripe tomato slices, sometimes with a little salt, sometimes with mayonnaise, sometimes grilled until everything melted into something golden. But even cold, it worked. The acidity of the tomato, the smooth melt of the cheese. It was balance, it was brightness. It was a sandwich that never tried to be more than it was, and that is exactly why it worked. Some kids had it toasted, crusts crisp and corners dark. Others ate it fresh, just a quick assembly before the morning bell rang. Cheese and tomato was one of those sandwiches that looked like it came together in 5 minutes, but tasted like it had been passed down for generations. Today, it still shows up in cafes and comfort food menus, but for those who grew up with it in their lunchboxes, it is something more. It is summer in a sandwich, a reminder that even the simplest things can be perfect. Peanut butter and jelly was the monarch of all school sandwiches. Simple, sticky, and absolutely undefeated. A dollop of peanut butter on one slice, jelly on the other, pressed together until the edges sealed and the flavors melded. Grape, strawberry, sometimes both. It did not matter. It was the taste of childhood, packed into brown paper bags, plastic containers, or wrapped in foil that stuck to the jelly when you opened it. You knew what it was before you even saw it. It had weight. It had smell. It had presence. For many, it was the first sandwich they ever made by themselves. The one you never got tired of. The one you always counted on. The flavor that still makes you pause when you see it on a shelf. Some sandwiches disappear, others become legends. Peanut butter and jelly? It never left. Now we are talking classic. Corned beef and coleslaw on seeded rye is one of those sandwiches that knew how to make an entrance without raising its voice. You would find it wrapped in wax paper at your local deli or sitting proud on a tray next to a pickle spear and a bag of chips. The corned beef was thin sliced but packed with punch, salty, tender, and just fatty enough to remind you this was not diet food. Then came the slaw. Not too creamy, not too dry, with just the right crunch to cut through the richness of the meat. Pile that high between two slices of seeded rye, sturdy, peppery, with that classic bite, and you had something special. This was the kind of sandwich that told you to sit down and take your time. It did not rush. It did not play games. It was the kind of thing you ordered when you wanted to feel like an adult, even if you were still wearing platform shoes and listening to disco on cassette. Deli counters made legends, and this one was a heavy hitter. But if corned beef was too bold for your taste, there was always its milder cousin, the quiet, sweet-talking ham salad that somehow became a staple without anyone noticing. In the bleak economic landscape of the 1930s, the trusty carrot, often abundant and dirt cheap, was quietly elevated from supporting actor in stews to star ingredient in sandwich spreads like the carrot marmalade sandwich. Homemade carrot marmalade spread generously over stale bread might sound peculiar today, but during the Great Depression, it showcased a brilliant combination of thriftiness and culinary creativity. When sugar became scarce and costly, innovative homemakers cleverly utilized carrots' natural sweetness, simmering them slowly into a thick, jammy preserve to mimic traditional fruit marmalade. Notably, carrots were among the most reliably available vegetables during the Depression. Their hardiness meant nearly anyone could cultivate a patch, even with limited gardening skills. Families often had surplus carrots, providing an ideal solution to the era's pervasive hunger. To avoid waste, stale bread, previously destined for the compost heap, was refreshed by this sweet and slightly tangy marmalade, transforming it into an unexpectedly pleasant treat. Despite its humble origins, carrot marmalade gained popularity, prompting home economists of the time to distribute official recipes for this vitamin-packed, budget-friendly spread. Bologna and potato salad sandwiches were just as effective at getting the entire family on the table and doubling as the perfect school lunch for your kid. Grade 5 or high school, none of that mattered, because even adults well into their career enjoyed these. People working long jobs would pack a bologna and potato salad sandwich in their backpack to ensure all their food needs were met. Often, you would come into a home around the afternoon and find kids glued to the TV with a bologna and potato salad sandwich in hand. Mixing in some chicken chunks or chips would only upgrade an already stellar dish, and we definitely want potato salads and this sandwich to make a comeback. Creamed chipped beef on toast, or as anyone who ever served in the military will tell you, SOS. No, not a cry for help, though it looked like one. This was dried beef, shredded and stirred into a thick, milky white sauce with a bit of pepper and sometimes a touch of Worcestershire if you were fancy. Then it got spooned over toast, or biscuits, or whatever bread you had. It was a direct descendant of World War II rations. But by the 1970s, it had made its way into American homes, school cafeterias, and greasy spoon diners across the country. It was salty. It was creamy. It looked like a mistake, but somehow, it kept getting made and loved. It was affordable, filling, and tasted better than it had any right to. Parents made it because it used cheap pantry ingredients. Diners served it with coffee refills. Kids ate it because they did not know any better, then grew up craving it again. It might not be pretty, but it is unforgettable. Still, not everything on this list is heavy. Some sandwiches were just simple, clever ways to use what was left on the breakfast table, and a little sweet on the side. Throughout the hardships of the Great Depression, creativity in the kitchen became as vital as bread itself, leading to culinary experiments that modern taste buds might find curious. Among these unusual creations was the humble yet surprisingly refreshing cucumber and sugar sandwich. Thinly sliced cucumbers lightly dusted with sugar, sandwiched between slices of bread. Sugar may seem extravagant for the 1930s, yet households often had small reserves carefully rationed for moments exactly like this, transforming bland cucumbers into something akin to dessert. Garden cucumbers, prolific and hardy, grew abundantly, becoming the unsung heroes of many Depression-era meals. Interestingly, cucumbers were favored because they matured rapidly, providing a dependable source of nutrition when pantry staples were uncertain. Clever homemakers discovered sprinkling sugar over cucumbers masked their watery blandness, turning a simple vegetable sandwich into an affordable treat. Even kids who usually avoided vegetables happily ate it. In fact, this unlikely pairing became popular enough to feature in homemaking pamphlets of the era, billed as a sweet sandwich children would actually finish. Corned beef tongue with mustard in between fluffy bread slices. Okay, beef tongue might be way out of your palate, but don't disregard the corned beef tongue sandwich just yet. For something to fade from history, it's got to cement its spot there first, right? Can't do that if you don't bring something to the table. Perhaps this one will bring a lot more than you'd expect. It's traditionally prepared with carrots, garlic, red pepper, black pepper, salt, onions, mayo, and spice like bell pepper, paprika, and some garnishes like lime and parsley. So we already have the makings of a savory delight. You really want to keep a close eye on the beef tongue while it's in the pot, though. It can alter the flavor or dry it out fast. Though this sandwich has faded into the past now, the intricacy and delicacy through which it was created is a marvel to look back at. Maybe one day, this sandwich will come back at fancy restaurants, but for now, it remains a figment of the past. Now, bologna is not what you would call glamorous, but in the 1970s, someone took that humble meat and turned it into a straight-up miracle. Enter the bologna pizza sandwich. This was not a joke, it was genius. You start with a soft hamburger bun, maybe left over from the weekend cookout. On the bottom half, you lay down a slice of bologna, and if you are doing it right, you give it a quick sizzle in a frying pan so the edges curl up like a little meatball. Then you spoon on tomato sauce, canned, homemade, whatever you have, and top it with shredded mozzarella. After that, into the broiler it goes. What comes out is pure nostalgia with melted cheese dripping down the sides and the edges of the bologna just crispy enough to give it bite. It smelled like school lunch and after-school cartoons. This was a sandwich that did not care what anyone thought. It was pizza-inspired, budget-friendly, and full of attitude. A little greasy? Sure. A little weird? Absolutely. But no one ever forgot their first one. But if bologna in a broiler felt like a stretch, get ready for the canned spread that showed up in lunchboxes, picnic baskets, and every pantry with a shelf of shame, and somehow stayed beloved. In a time when food waste was practically unthinkable, even potato scraps found their way onto dinner tables as an ingenious sandwich filling known as the fried potato peel sandwich. During the Great Depression, resourcefulness wasn't just admired, it was essential for survival. Potato peels, typically discarded today without a second glance, became the surprise stars of family meals when frugal cooks discovered that frying them crisp and sprinkling a touch of salt transformed kitchen waste into an affordable delicacy. Potatoes were abundant, inexpensive, and nutritious, making them a cornerstone of Depression-era cooking. Yet their peels often held valuable nutrients, something homemakers recognized instinctively, long before modern nutritionists praised potato skins as vitamin-packed. Clever cooks stretched resources by saving these peelings, crisping them to crunchy perfection, and layering them between slices of bread for a sandwich that was satisfying, flavorful, and, importantly, dirt cheap. Remarkably, newspapers and food columns of the 1930s openly suggested frying potato peels to add bulk and nutrition to scarce diets, turning desperation into culinary inspiration. The bacon and peanut butter sandwich was one that caught our eyes the most. Crispy bacon paired with peanut butter sounded like a combination that could just work somehow. This was a no-brainer for Americans. If their left kidney is sustained by peanut butter, the right is sustained by bacon. Both together probably provide just the right amount of fuel to get through the day or a grueling 9-to-5 shift. A great condiment to go with this is unsweetened ketchup, because most ketchups today have artificial sweeteners. This isn't as popular as it used to be, but it hasn't declined enough in renown that it's that outlandish of an idea. Give it a try some weekend, you might be pleasantly surprised. Sautéed or caramelized onions provide just the right complementary flavor to the crispy bacon, while also not overloading your taste buds because of the peanut butter. The club sandwich was never shy about making an entrance. This was the sandwich equivalent of wearing a tuxedo to a barbecue. Triple layered, cut diagonally, and always served with a cocktail toothpick jabbed right through the middle like a victory flag, the classic clubhouse was a masterclass in controlled chaos. You had turkey, ham, and bacon stacked with lettuce, tomato, and mayonnaise on white toast, then doubled up like it had something to prove. One bite, and you got the salty crunch of bacon, the cool snap of lettuce, the savory chew of ham, and that creamy mayo keeping everything glued together. It was tall. It was filling. It was an edible tower of American lunch pride. You could find it at diners, roadside motels, airport cafes, and your Aunt Linda's house on a Sunday afternoon. No one ever finished a club sandwich without looking like they'd just solved a puzzle. Picking it up was half the battle. Eating it cleanly? Impossible. But satisfying? Always. This was the sandwich you ordered when you wanted to feel like you were doing something important. And while this one wore its sandwich royalty crown proudly, the next one took a completely different route, turning cheap lunch meat into the closest thing we ever got to pizza on a bun. In the 1930s, leftovers weren't something you tossed. They were tomorrow's lunch. That mentality gave birth to dishes like the cold baked bean sandwich, a Depression-era staple composed of leftover baked beans spread generously between bread slices. Though beans today might evoke images of summertime barbecues, in Depression kitchens, they symbolized frugality and survival. Beans were economical powerhouses, affordable, nutritious, and easy to cook in large batches. Families routinely simmered huge pots, using beans for multiple meals, stretching their budgets and pantries to their absolute limits. After hot bean suppers, resourceful homemakers cleverly repurposed any remnants, spreading them cold onto bread to create an easy, protein-rich sandwich for lunchboxes the next day. Newspapers of the period promoted beans as an essential pantry staple, boasting about their nutritional benefits and cost-effectiveness, while quietly ignoring their less glamorous qualities, perhaps for the best. Oddly enough, baked beans in sandwiches wasn't an entirely new idea. British households had long enjoyed bean buddies, proving thriftiness travels well. Most of the lovers of chicken salad and grape sandwiches dwindled a lot over the years, and now it is just a memory. No one does comfort food better than Americans, and the iconic potato chips and cheese sandwich is proof. People would grab cheddar or mozzarella cheese and a packet of Frito-Lays or a can of Pringles and get busy at the table but not in the kitchen. Reason being, this was one of those 10-minute dishes that took absolutely no effort or time to make, like instant noodles. Barbecue-flavored chips would be preferred, because they added a secondary flavor, but all kinds were used and the crunch was just to die for. In the 1970s, chips like Pringles were getting more and more popular in America, and that made it even easier for this to take center stage. What would follow in the decades after was a growing concern for health, and people stopped making their favorite potato chips and cheese sandwiches, but we would love a 70s plate. If you were a regular at lunch counters in the 1970s, there was one cold cut that had a mysterious charm: pickle and pimento loaf. It had a look that was hard to ignore. A pale pink meat dotted with bright green pickle bits and tiny flecks of red pimento, like a mosaic made by someone who really loved sandwiches. It came sliced thin from behind the deli glass, slapped between white bread with a dab of mayonnaise, and wrapped in wax paper with a soda on the side. You did not question it. You just ate it. The flavor? Tangy, savory, and weirdly sweet, but not in a bad way. It had the texture of bologna, the bite of pickle, and the color scheme of a Christmas tree. For some reason, it vanished from most grocery shelves by the end of the decade. Maybe tastes changed, or maybe we just stopped putting pickles inside our meat. But back then, it was an easy go-to, a bit of fun, and a total conversation starter if you pulled it out during lunch break. Of course, if you thought that sandwich was messy looking, just wait until we dive into the one that was literally impossible to eat without getting sauce all over your hands and loving it. In Depression-era America, homemakers learned quickly that flavor often resided in the drippings left in their skillets. Bacon grease, now casually discarded, was prized as liquid gold, giving rise to imaginative dishes like the lettuce and bacon grease sandwich. At first glance, combining crisp lettuce with bacon drippings might seem contradictory, like ordering a diet soda with your large fries, but during the lean 1930s, it made perfect sense. Bacon, when affordable, provided protein, but every precious drop of rendered fat was meticulously saved in kitchen jars for future meals. Lettuce, on the other hand, was a garden-friendly crop, inexpensive and abundant, offering essential freshness and vitamins. Clever cooks of the time combined these humble ingredients, lightly dressing freshly picked lettuce leaves in warm bacon grease, sprinkling them with salt, then sandwiching them between bread slices. Surprisingly delicious, the grease transformed mundane lettuce into something savory and satisfying. Historical cookbooks and government-issued pamphlets frequently promoted bacon fat as an affordable seasoning, suggesting it could practically perform culinary miracles. The patty melt was not just a sandwich, it was a lifestyle. It belonged to truck stops, corner booths, and places where the waitress calls you hon. Start with a beef patty, not too thick, not too thin, grilled until the edges charred just enough. Then pile on caramelized onions so sweet they practically melt, and drop a couple of slices of Swiss cheese on top until it oozes over like lava. But the crown jewel? That rye bread, buttered and toasted right on the griddle. It soaked up everything. The beefy drippings, the onion sweetness, the crispy edges of the cheese. Every bite was a perfect mix of crunchy and gooey, salty and buttery. You were not just eating a sandwich, you were biting into pure diner energy. People had this at lunch and still talked about it at dinner. If your parents ever made this at home, you were one of the lucky ones. And if not, you probably still remember your first time trying one and realizing a sandwich could actually stop time. But not every sandwich needed to be hot off the grill. Some came cold, weirdly fancy, and straight from the pages of a church cookbook. During the economic struggles of the 1930s, Americans learned to see value in even the humblest ingredients, leading to clever culinary combinations like the mustard and cabbage sandwich. Shredded raw cabbage tossed with spicy mustard transformed a simple vegetable into a crunchy, tangy filling that made eating on a budget more palatable, literally. Cabbage, inexpensive and incredibly durable, became a Depression-era favorite because it thrived in home gardens and could survive months in cool root cellars. Food guides frequently promoted cabbage as a cheap source of vitamins, humorously dubbing it poor man's medicine, though perhaps the medicine metaphor came partly from its powerful aroma. Pairing this everyday vegetable with mustard wasn't accidental. Spicy mustard, affordable and packed with flavor, had a unique talent for making bland foods suddenly appealing. Cookbooks of the era praised mustard as a versatile condiment, often highlighting its ability to rescue dull dishes. The pairing was smart, as the sharpness of mustard perfectly balanced the mild, crunchy cabbage. Cooked chicken livers mixed with onions and spices came together to create the chicken liver sandwich. Now, out of all the ones on the list, this one has probably stood the test of time the most rigidly. You'll still find it in the odd bistro or cafe here and there. Preparing it is a bit of work, but for those who want to expand their sandwich arsenal, this is a worthy addition. You'll need celery, red onions, curry powder, salt and pepper, and lettuce of your choice. Once you've mixed your meat with your vegetables and spices, it's time to get cooking in a 350-degree skillet and mix well. Once it's all ready, assemble your sandwich and see just why this was so popular around the 1940-1960s. Cornmeal, the affordable cornerstone of many Depression-era pantries, regularly transformed from bland porridge into crispy delights. One creative result was the cornmeal mush sandwich, a hearty sandwich featuring leftover cornmeal mush fried until crisp, then placed snugly between bread slices. Though today's diners might chuckle at the idea of mush becoming sandwich-worthy, during the Great Depression, cornmeal mush was more than an economical meal. It was practically survival food, providing necessary calories at minimal cost. Resourceful homemakers routinely prepared large batches, knowing the leftovers, once cooled and firm, could easily be sliced and fried for future meals. Historical newspapers frequently touted cornmeal as the American staple, humorously reassuring housewives they could count on cornmeal mush in lean times, even when neighbors proved less reliable. The cleverness came when leftover mush was fried, converting it from a monotonous dish into an appealing, crunchy patty that gave texture and flavor to humble sandwiches. Ham salad was the sandwich that crept into your life without warning and just stayed. It was never flashy, never demanding, but it had a way of showing up when you needed it most. Diced ham, usually the leftovers from Sunday dinner, got chopped fine and tossed with mayonnaise, sweet pickle relish, and maybe a squirt of yellow mustard or a spoonful of Miracle Whip if you were feeling wild. It was smooth, creamy, with just enough tang to make you wonder why you did not eat it more often. Spread it thick on soft white bread. Throw on a lettuce leaf if you're trying to be classy, and you had a sandwich that felt like summer picnics and small-town potlucks. It tasted like home. Like old Tupperware containers pulled from the fridge and packed into a picnic basket with a bag of chips and a slice of pie wrapped in foil. No one ever called it their favorite, but no one turned it down either. That is the magic of ham salad. It stayed in the background, steady and familiar. But not every sandwich played it safe. Some brought the heat, and maybe a little spice from south of the border. When grape jelly teamed up with bologna during the Depression, the combination created more than confusion. It birthed an unexpectedly beloved sandwich, the bologna and jelly sandwich. At first glance, pairing thinly sliced, inexpensive bologna meat with sweet grape jelly might seem like a culinary accident, but in the context of 1930s America, it was nothing short of brilliant ingenuity. Bologna was a Depression staple because it stretched meat budgets further than any cut of beef or pork ever could, appearing in kitchens nationwide as the quintessential poor man's steak. Similarly, grape jelly, often homemade from wild or backyard grapes, offered a cheap, sweet contrast readily available in most households. The salty, savory taste of Bologna unexpectedly complemented jelly's sweetness, creating a sandwich quirky enough to please even skeptical palates. Interestingly, early cooking pamphlets and newspapers occasionally endorsed this odd pairing, promoting it as a practical yet flavorful way to diversify Depression-era diets. Far from being merely an oddity, this sandwich underscores how cleverly resourceful our grandparents were, turning modest ingredients into sandwiches both memorable and satisfying. Remember what chilly days at Graham's called for back in the day? If you guessed hot turkey sandwich, you're absolutely right. This sandwich was another one of Grandma's delicious ways of using up leftover turkey from Thanksgiving. This sandwich featured slices of tender turkey served hot, often open-faced, with a generous ladle of rich, savory gravy poured over the top. Sounds delicious, right? Grandma made her hot turkey sandwich special with the gravy. Whether she made it from scratch with turkey drippings or used a trusted recipe, the rich gravy soaked into the bread, making each bite juicy and flavorful. She knew that nothing went to waste, and the hot turkey sandwich was a delicious way to make the most of those leftovers. There is something dangerously comforting about mixing bacon grease with anything sweet, and that is exactly what bacon and apple butter on white bread was. You take crisp, salty bacon, still warm from the skillet, and press it into a slice of soft white bread that has been generously smeared with apple butter. That is it. No lettuce, no cheese, no rules. The combination was 100% homemade magic. It tasted like fall mornings, cast iron skillets, and someone's grandma telling you not to eat too fast. Apple butter gave it this rich, spiced flavor that clung to your mouth just long enough for the bacon to come crashing through. It was smoky. It was sweet. It was not trying to impress anyone. The real win here was in how it reused leftovers. If breakfast was done, and you had a few stray strips of bacon and a jar of apple butter on hand, this sandwich practically made itself. The kind of thing you whipped up while the coffee was still brewing. Maybe it never made it to a diner menu, but it made it to enough hearts to matter. And speaking of sandwiches that mattered, let us talk about the skyscraper of cold cuts that ruled every diner plate with a toothpick flag on top. The scrapple sandwich is exactly what the name suggests: fried slices of scrapple on bread. Traditionally, this sandwich would be sliced and prepared in a skillet, under a thick layer of eggs. It definitely became popular around the Maryland to New York district, but the recipe itself is properly ancient. An 1853 extract from a cookbook advises using pork that wouldn't be suitable for sausage. It was also popular for its health benefits. It can be made in a variety of ways, and some people include crispy cabbage on top and make it into a waffle with mayo. Mix and match and see what works best for you. Maybe you'll find something worth sharing. But for now, the scrapple sandwich can only be something you create. With its popularity last seen in the mid-1850s, this sandwich is something that we can only find in old extracts now. Imagine being 8 years old and opening your lunchbox to find chopped olive and cream cheese on pumpernickel. Either your mom was ahead of her time, or she found an old cocktail recipe card and just went with it. This sandwich was salty, tangy, creamy, and somehow kind of grown up. You had green olives chopped so fine they could sneak into your taste buds before your brain caught on, mixed with cream cheese until it was a spread so thick it stuck to the knife like it had a mission. All of that smeared onto a slice of deep, dark pumpernickel that practically demanded you respect it. It was not flashy, it was not sweet, and no kid was trading their cookie for it, but it had an edge, the kind of flavor that got better the more you chewed. Somewhere along the way, this party appetizer snuck into lunchboxes, Tupperware, and even a few kitchen counters at 2 in the morning. It was strange, but it made sense. The 70s were weird like that. Spreads were suddenly sandwiches and finger food was fair game. Of course, if you thought cold spreads were wild, wait until you see what happens when tuna salad goes face to face with a broiler. Among the unlikely culinary heroes of the Great Depression was a sandwich featuring sliced tomatoes sprinkled lightly with sugar, the tomato and sugar sandwich. Tomatoes, easy to grow and abundant in backyard gardens, were embraced as a budget-friendly food staple during hard economic times. This sandwich cleverly paired the natural acidity of ripe tomatoes with a touch of sweetness, making them appealing enough even for skeptical children. Surprisingly, sugar, though carefully rationed, was frequently recommended in 1930s homemaking guides as a versatile flavor enhancer, transforming humble ingredients into tastier meals. Newspapers even promoted tomatoes as the perfect vegetable for cash-strapped families, humorously dubbing them "poor man's oranges" due to their vibrant color and juicy interior. Combining tomatoes and sugar wasn't just a quirky experiment, it was practical ingenuity. Sweetening tomatoes masked their tartness, giving them broader culinary appeal and preventing precious produce from going to waste. Modern taste buds might initially find the concept puzzling. After all, tomato sandwiches traditionally call for mayonnaise and salt, but Depression-era cooks weren't afraid to rewrite culinary rules if it meant saving pennies. If these forgotten school sandwiches took you back, leave a comment, hit like, and subscribe before the bell rings on this memory for good.